Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of Found Friday, a weekly web series dedicated to all things search, content, and findability on the web and sometimes beyond. Kind of depends on what mood we're in that week. I am excited this week to talk a little bit about the intersection of search and social. And this is kind of leading up to Found Conference, which happens in a couple weeks. And we're talking about kind of 10 core topics when we're there. And we've actually got Carolyn Lyden here to chat with us from CallRail. And so what I wanted to start out with is she's the SEO manager there and does a lot of really great and fun stuff. And I've had the chance to chat with her before. So I was going to let you tell us a little bit about why you're here and why you're excited to talk about search and social here and at Found Conference.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Carolyn. I'm the SEO manager at CallRail. So I sort of help develop the SEO program there. But part of that is also working with people across the marketing team, including the content team and our social and community teams, to sort of find this good intersection of what works well for SEO and what works well for content, and how we can use that to succeed on social media and the different platforms on social media as well. And our social team also manages our community forum, which is like another version of social in my opinion. And it's almost like a lot of people, I think nowadays, are like, use Reddit, get information from Reddit. And it's almost like having a community forum like that is having like your own personalized social media for whatever your product is. And I think it's like all this great information that you can garner from user generated content on these platforms, and then make your SEO better and therefore make your social better. And it's like this awesome cycle of like making your marketing totally better by working together. And I think a lot of departments right now work in, or not necessarily, I'm generalizing, but a lot of people work in silos where they're like, this is what works for SEO, so everyone just has to do this. And I think working together sort of like broadens the perspectives and makes everyone better.
Yeah, and so I 100% agree, and we actually talk about this a lot, both on Found Friday and just kind of inside the organization at DemandSphere. One of the things that we are going to cover during today's show is missed opportunities for where we're not using understanding what's going on with search or what's going on with social to kind of create better content or to amplify our traffic or engage our audience a little bit better. And last week we had Moses Velasco from Social Bakers on, and one of the things we were talking about on that show was the personalization of kind of content to your funnel, right? Or like making sure that content is actually maps up to the funnel. Now, full disclosure, I hate the traditional concept of a sales and marketing funnel. I think it's BS because I think it misleads people, because I think that what happens is you get kind of bogged down this idea that certain types of content work really well in certain types of funnels or certain stages, which I think leads people to not explore a lot of content opportunities or different types of engagement that they might have had they just open-mindedly like really explored everything, right? But that's
Right.
where I think the intersection of search and social starts to play a really great role, is in both search and social, audiences are natively telling you what it is they want or what it is they need or what they care about. They're not being led. They're not clicking on an ad or being pushed something. They are discussing things in their own words. And we'll talk a little bit more about why using your own words is really important across those. But that's where it all starts, right? It's like we're having a real conversation, and it's like that in search too. And I think people don't believe it's a conversation, but I'm looking for something, and I'm being served back tons of conversational responses to what
Right.
I'm looking for in a lot of different content types.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I 100% agree with your perspective of the funnel too. And I think a lot of times people don't, because of the traditional view of what the market sales and marketing funnel is, people don't really understand how social fits in, and that it doesn't necessarily always fit in exactly where we think it should. So like, all right, people, we're in the middle of the funnel, like let me, and then they like try to shove people down further, and your people are like, I'm not ready yet. That's I don't remember what marketing conference I went to, but one thing that stood out for me is one, the presenters was like, stop shoving people down the funnel when they're not ready. And part of that is like really tailoring whatever message you have, whatever piece of content you have, to each individual platform and what people are telling you they want from that platform, especially on
Yeah,
social media, I think.
I feel like the funnel itself, people think of it because of its shape that we've chosen, and all the fun little graphics starting
Right.
back, 100 years ago with like arrows pointing down. to me, the funnel is really like more like a marketing tornado, right? And you may spin down and convert, but you may also go back up sometimes. And to me, that's all okay because it's the journey that you took to engage with products and services or offerings that a brand has. And I think for a lot of times, especially now, people don't offer just one thing.
Yeah.
So maybe you came in and started engaging on one thing, but maybe over time your needs changed, or maybe we showed you additional features or options, and then that led you down a different path, which made you kind of start back over for a different products funnel, or all of these different things. And I think a lot of times too, we'll have different conversations with people at different times, during their experience within an organization. So maybe when they first started, they were like doing kind of a tool review, not sure where we're at, or they inherited a tool and then they start to get to know somebody. Maybe they come circle back later on. There's just so many ways to go about it. So I agree, trying to shove people down the funnel makes everyone uncomfortable, right? Because when you're marketing at someone, it makes you as a person on kind of the marketing end, a lot of times you're putting something in front of somebody that they're not ready to see. And then on the receiving end, you feel uncomfortable because you're like, yeah, I know that I kind of said I was interested, but now it's weird.
Yeah.
Um,
They kind of want to
so
reject you now.
yeah, it's like, oh crap, like now I wish I just would have never ever said like yes to the first thing.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the reasons I love search and social so much. And I love all the crossovers that we have between them, is because this is where people really get a chance to tell us what they want, what they need, how they're describing their problems. A lot of times people don't even necessarily know how to describe their problem, right? Like they're describing, something that is a piece of a larger problem, or is like a huge problem that may have like a lot of little pieces that need to be kind of put together. But that's what I love. So talk to me a little bit about, when you're working there, because you're the SEO manager and you're obviously working with other folks. Talk to me a little bit about how you see being able to interact better across kind of different departments.
Yeah, so like I mean, part of it is just going to, I think, initially going to the people in the other departments and being like, here are my goals. What are your goals? Like, where can we intersect and work together on these goals? Because obviously we're all working together. We're all working toward the same like success. And I think a lot of times people see it as adversarial when it doesn't necessarily have to be like, I'm fighting for a budget. And instead, we should be figuring out ways that we can use the budget better together to like, make our profits this much higher or whatever it is, or revenue this much higher. So like initially starting off with that in mind and then figuring out the best ways to work together. So my content, the guy who manages our content at CallRail named Jules, we actually met together this past week to talk about what's a good process that we can figure out to streamline, like, this is what works for SEO, this is what works for people who are like figuring out the product. So like the top of funnel, what would be in theory the middle of funnel and the bottom of the funnel. But also like you were saying, like, okay, if people want to just learn more about this feature, let's not just be like, okay, convert, convert, convert. But how can we like sort of make it's like an ecosystem, figuring that out and getting everyone sort of like involved and having buy-in in that process. And I've been meeting with our social media manager. She also manages our community, Kate, pretty much since I started working at CallRail. She started like a couple months before I did, and then I started there. And we've been meeting weekly pretty much since I've been there to talk about like, all right, what's going well for you in social? What tools do you use in social? That would be awesome to learn about, like what people are actually looking for. These, like you were talking about, people asking questions in their own words on these social media platforms that we could then translate into content that would do really well for SEO. So it's like, and also one thing I think is super fun is being like doing sort of like Twitter chats and these like online community things for the brand, but also by myself. Like I do them as myself, and then I talk to the brand about ways that they can be better at it. But we're like building this rapport with other people who are industry experts. And then when we want to ask those industry experts something, we can use the quotes in our pieces of content across social media, and then they can share it as well. So there's like, it's sort of like exponentially using social media for SEO, for content, and everybody is like building upon it and being successful as a result.
One of the things that you mentioned is something that we talk a lot about, and it's both directions, right? from search and social, and then it actually expands out to the rest of the marketing ecosystem. So the example that you kind of gave was stuff that people are asking about and talking about in social, and then that being leveraged to create content that'll perform really well in search, right? And the flip version of that is we see what people are searching for in search and where we have content that's ranking really well, and then we utilize those keywords and those, you know, URLs to share on our social channels, because obviously we've got content that is really relevant around that specific topic, and we've done well at creating content that meets a need or answers the question. So, you know, there's kind of both ends. So, you know, on the social end, we get all these different places where people are talking about things, whether it's, you know, in a forum or, you know, kind of on Twitter or Facebook or somewhere else, you know, discussing these different problems or kind of looking for something or engaging with people, and then saying, hey, you know what, we actually don't have any content around that. That would be really, you know, like somewhere that we're probably missing out. And then using what they're searching as kind of what your target is, right? Like your target keyword and topic stuff. So then, you know, going back the other direction. Now, I actually like to take this a step further, which is to say, don't stop at just search and social. Once you actually start working this ecosystem back and forth, take those topics and things that you're seeing in social or you're seeing on search, use them as your email subject lines, use them as, you know, your email topics. Like, why are we not doing that? You know, why are we not, you know, lacing in like ad content or any paid efforts into those things? Because, it, you know, we don't want to be this situation that, you know, you kind of alluded to, which is where people get really siloed and they fight over budget. And I think that what happens when we fight over our department's budget is we're not making choices that increase overall profitability and revenue for the organization. And that means the budget starts to dwindle. So we're fighting over smaller and smaller pieces, and it's kind of a race to the bottom. So for me, the way that I always look at it is, if everybody does a great job and increases, you know, some portion, then everybody will end up with more budget eventually, because because the entire revenue of the organization will change, as opposed to going the other direction, which is I'm so concerned with hoarding my budget that I'm willing to tank the company's revenue or flatline revenue in order to achieve that goal.
Yeah, instead of fighting over pieces of the pie, just bake a bigger pie.
Yep, and I think that we see a lot of people nervous about sharing data sometimes, and not just about sharing data, but sharing, you know, what they feel is attribution, right? They want to say, how do I make sure that people count these leads or these sales or conversions to my particular department? And I think that this actually starts at the top of an organization, where we can't reward departments that way by saying, you know, okay, you did this and you did that, because as you mentioned, it is in fact an ecosystem. And this doesn't mean that I'm against metrics. I run an analytics company, so obviously metrics are my jam. But I think that when you reward people in a way that makes them feel that they need to try to focus more on taking credit than they do on increasing things, they're so specifically focused on paying a lot for measurement or implementing new measurement tools. They're not focused on doing the thing that would actually create the thing they're measuring.
Right. And I think it's also a lot of times it's kind of hard to measure SEO because, or I'm not SEO, excuse me. It's hard to measure search, not search either. Social, sorry. I'm getting so off track. It's really hard to measure social sometimes because there's a lot of visibility, and if you create an ad or if you create a post and someone doesn't necessarily click it or click through, but there's visibility as they're scrolling and they take note of it, they can potentially either Google that and it'll come in as SEO, it'll come in as organic traffic, or they'll just type in, you know, what they assume your URL is, if it's an easy to figure out URL, and it can come in as direct. So like there are elements, I think, of social that are sort of like muddled in the middle that are hard to give exact numbers to, but it does contribute to overall brand awareness and these sort of like, I don't know, like fuzzy feelings we have toward a brand that you can't tie direct numbers to. That, you know, maybe someone doesn't necessarily like your page or follow your page as a result of that post, but they become aware of your brand and there is some visibility there, and it's hard to give direct numbers to. And oftentimes it'll get grouped into SEO because, oh, they searched for the brand name after they saw you, or they typed in the URL directly, and that's therefore like direct traffic or something like that. But I think there is value to that for sure.
It also gives what I call social proof, not social media proof, but social proof, like the same way that if you are um, on the dating scene, right? And you go out to a bar and there's somebody who like nobody else will talk to, like, and everybody seems to be avoiding that person like the plague. Or they're just kind of like absent from the scene in your community and like they don't seem to know anybody and nobody seems to really interact with them. You're kind of like, hey, that's a little weird. But you see somebody and they're out with other people and they look like they've got friends. You're like, oh, social proof that this person, you know, has real relationships, is a real person. They
Right.
seem to have like connections to people I know. To me, a lot of what social media does is starts to build that feeling with kind of the overall public of you're here, you're present, you're engaging, you're real, right? Because of so much of our business now and our communication is done virtually, we need that kind of connective concrete tissue. I think this is why people have spent so much money finding great community managers and social media managers and digital brand specialists and things like that, is because we want that personality feeling back in things, because we got very bogged down originally when social media came out in the legality of everything, right? Everything was about, did legal approve my tweet, you know? And it's just like, legal can't approve a tweet because I'm sorry, by the time legal approves it, it's not relevant anymore. And I can't do that. And I mean, it's funny because I was actually working at a social sharing platform, like really back on in the early on days of all this. And, you know, people were talking about wanting to be able to share things really quickly, you know, like content and stuff online to, you know, Twitter and Facebook and different things. And when brands would sign up, they would always be like, well, what do we do about legal? And I was just like, you just tell them that it's social media and they just can't get that involved with it, or set
Yeah.
some general brand guidelines and go with it. So one of the things I want to touch on that we were mentioning as well is this idea that because it's harder to measure certain aspects of things like social, people will say, okay, well, I've got these 10 channels and Twitter doesn't seem to, I can't attribute anything to Twitter, so I'm just going to turn it off. Like, I'm just going to
Yeah.
stop, right? How dangerous is that in an ecosystem where it'd be like essentially removing plants from the ecosystem, or like trees from a forest and saying like, oh, I couldn't really figure out what the tree did this week, so like, nah, we didn't really need the trees.
Well, I think it sort of goes back to what you were saying before too, of like the idea of like social proof, where if I go on and I see a brand has like, you know, 1,000 tweets, and then I go look and the most recent one was March of 2017, I'm like, what happened to them? Like, what are they doing? And like, why did they determine that this wasn't a relevant channel for them anymore? And do
Or are they
I,
even still in business?
yeah, or, and do I therefore trust them? Like, I don't know. I think I'll find someone else it is for. So I think, and I think as long as you're involving people in your social media, like marketing department in everything else, that you won't like in your content creation, in like your SEO strategy, that sort of thing, you don't like run the risk of being like, they're not contributing to the ecosystem, because they obviously are contributing to the ecosystem. And I think also vocalizing that to them, because I'm sure it can feel lonely to be like, oh, I posted some things and got 2 retweets and a like, and and there's obviously more value to that. And it's also sort of like cumulative too. So like I was saying, over time, I can see that you've been putting constant effort into your social media, even just as a consumer, versus like, oh, we just tweet like once a month and it's just something random. Some of the most interesting brands I find on Twitter are the ones that like tweet random fun content. Like I actually, this is weird, but for my master's degree, I did a study on like how people use toilet paper and how people market toilet paper, because it's such like a weird commodity. You go in, you buy what you need, and it is what it is. Like nobody doesn't make a, and as a general rule, we don't make a conscious choice. We choose a brand and we always buy that brand. But still, brands like Charmin are like doing really fun things on Twitter and getting people to engage with toilet paper brands on Twitter, which you like, that's something that they maybe be like, oh, well, we got 25 likes and a couple of retweets, or, you know, some may get none, but it's a cumulative brand effort that people are become like friendly with that brand on a social media platform that you wouldn't have thought of necessarily before.
I completely agree. And I think that there's there's something to me that says it's also incumbent on folks who work in social to understand how to share the data and the learnings that they have across other places. Like what we were saying is that information that you're garnering from social, content creators shouldn't come to you and ask you for it, and
Yeah.
SEO shouldn't come to you and ask you for it, right? Like this should be a group effort, and it should just be a discussion about what data you are mining from the channels that you are responsible for and from the areas that you're working on, and you should be proactively looking for ways to support and prop up other things. Because here's the thing, if you hoard that information and don't share it, then when it comes time to decide whether or not we should just turn off Twitter, nobody's like, oh my God, don't do that, because the information that we get from that is invaluable. That helps me do content ideation, or helps me decide tone of voice, or helps me pick keywords and topics. Like I use
Yeah.
hashtags as really great, like keyword finding things. And the same thing with using keywords that are performing really well in search as hashtags, like, different stuff like that. And I think that it's incumbent on everybody to not wait for somebody to tell them how to better work with their colleagues. I think you just have to start trying to work better with your colleagues and giving them the information and understanding that, like, this scarcity mentality isn't gonna end very well for anybody. So let's talk a little bit about, from an SEO and social standpoint, long tail, right? And how
Yeah.
impactful that is with both search and social, especially as we start seeing so much rise in voice search and the use of mobile and like more hyper local search. Like now, I think more than ever, these ties between search and social are really important, because these long tail keywords are so flippin' hard to find,
Yeah.
because you have to add them. If you're using an SEO platform, you have to add them, or they have to suggest them to you, right? But thanks to not provided, we're not just going to get a list of everything that somebody typed in. To some degree, it's a guessing game. So if you're not using both search and social together to try to figure that out, you're probably messing up.
Yeah, yeah. And I think social it's like sort of a minefield, especially when you're posting um, pieces of content or even questions for people on different social media platforms that can get them to engage with like and asking their own questions back. Like, how does this work? How would this, CallRail is call tracking. So people will be like, well, how will this work if I have businesses in different locations? Like, how does this work with franchises? And I'm like, well, nobody's going to like type in, how does call tracking work with franchises? And it's going to like show up like in my search console and stuff like that. So like that's a great idea, or yeah, a great idea. And we don't have necessarily content for that, maybe. So using the questions that people are asking on social media for content, I think is super awesome. And then that sort of relates back when you're talking about local. They have in Google My Business now the like question and answer thing. So consumers can go in and ask questions about a business, like what are the opening hours? What is, like the menu? And that's a good opportunity for you to be like, hey, I don't have like these recipes or this menu on my restaurant website. Like maybe I need, and if you don't, that's probably a problem unto itself. But like a lot of times it's small businesses and mom and pop shops, and they don't have their own website, or they have the Google site thing that's like one page or something like that. So like I'm very passionate about small businesses. So I think like giving them the opportunity to like get question and content ideas from Google My Business is super great too, which I guess is kind of like a form of social media.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times mom and pop places do pretty well with long tail keywords, because it's either hyper local, or
Yeah.
they have really passionately written about something that happens to answer these like longer tail queries. And my kind of general rule of thumb for using search and social, by the way, for long tail stuff is, if you see it as a question or a statement on social, add it as a tracked keyword. And if
Yeah.
you're using a platform that is like charging you a ton of money per tracked keyword, change platforms, because you're never going to get what you need from a content ideation and information standpoint if you keep doing that. And obviously not a product plug, but we just launched demand rankings because we recognized that our like bigger enterprise platform was too much for a lot of people. And a lot of people really just wanted to be able to track a ton of keywords on a daily basis, and go in there and do that. So I think that, you really have to focus on, if you see it on social, add it to search for tracking, and kind of vice versa, right? Like if you're starting to see a really big swell of like ranking rise for certain content, like, so say you've got some content and it's starting to rise really quickly in ranking, see what's going on in social, see who else is talking about it, see what competitors are talking about when it comes to that. I mean, don't just say, oh, we're doing great in rankings and check the box like we're
Yeah.
done, because you're missing out on some other stuff. Let's talk a little bit in our last few minutes about universal search elements and social, and kind of how all these things are like additional elements that boost up rankings. So we're talking about universal search for those who may not know kind of that terminology is answer box, knowledge panel, local 3-pack, video, shopping, all these different things. Obviously, video and social super closely tied together when it comes to results, news as well. But yeah, there's a ton of universal search elements out there, and I think a lot of them are really closely tied to social or get added in because of social sharing.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this a little bit at the beginning, but a lot of people are like, oh, well, links from social don't really help my SEO, so like it doesn't matter. I'm not going to invest that much in social media. But I've noticed that a lot of times when I'm searching for something specifically about SEO that's SEO related, I will get like people's replies on Twitter, like the little Twitter knowledge boxes will be like, oh, like John Mueller tweeted about this, or like somebody else answered this question. And I was like, oh, so yeah, social, or I mean, yeah, social's not helping necessarily with my SEO efforts, but it's showing up as a search result, which means I should be tweeting about these topics if I want to show up and get more people to link to me from these search.
And
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, Google is not telling us every single aspect that goes into their algorithm. It's obviously a combination of like a lot of different factors, both technical and non-technical in nature. There are things around, Google Business and Google Places and, like social sharing mechanisms and how much traffic is being driven regardless of the source, right? So like, how much traffic is your page getting? If you were doing social and driving a lot of traffic and then you stopped, like what does that actually look like?
right.
And you can do some of these experiments to try to see what this actually looks like for your content, and how ranking changes by adjusting social promotion and campaigns kind of on a somewhat regular basis. But I think that one of the things that what we're basically trying to get the point across is I would say it comes down to three things for me. One is it's your responsibility, no matter where in your organization you work, to both share your information in ways that you think could be helpful to other people, and to seek out information from other departments, whether they've offered it to you or not. The second thing is, because marketing is in fact an ecosystem, and it's really important to understand how the ecosystem works together, we want to make sure that we are not thinking that the ecosystem can ever be like we can just remove a portion of the ecosystem without experiencing some sort of
Right.
potential loss or change. And it may take a while to recognize it, or it may be really immediate. We don't know, but it'll happen. And the third thing is the idea of listening to what people are really describing and talking about, especially in this like long tail area, is so important as we grow as marketers, because it's getting harder and harder and noisier out there. And so the most important thing we can do is we can take what people are saying, we can listen to how they're describing their pain points and their needs, and then we can make sure to develop content that actually answers it and put it in the places that they are. And search, social, email, ads, videos, doesn't matter. Anywhere that you are, put it there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And a lot of times on social, I feel like people are telling you in their own words their pain points, and they don't know that they need a solution, or that a solution is out there. And so that's a great opportunity to transfer into SEO and be like, all right, this is a pain point people have that they don't know where the solution for. Let's write about it like they're asking about it, so they can know that we're the solution for that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we didn't touch on today that'll probably be part of a future episode, and we'll definitely talk about it found, is we've been talking about SEO and content creation like they are one and the same, right? But in a lot of organizations, they're not.
Right.
In a lot of organizations, SEO is a department, and editorial or content or whatever is a completely separate place. And those people kind of rarely ever talk. And, I've actually been working with an organization for a number of years, and they do still have portions of their organization that just create content and then they send it off to be SEO'd.
Yeah.
You know, like they're just like, somebody will SEO this later. It just gets
Right.
put in the queue. And I'm like, wow, that's such a tough thing to hear. But I know that they're not alone. I know that this is a problem and in a situation that so many organizations have. And so if you're talking about looking at search and social together, search, social, and content are all one big happy family. And I would tell people that email is also like a huge part of that. I think that there's so much missed opportunity with like subject line screw ups or not using the kinds of things that people are talking about on search, or I mean on social, or looking for in search as your subject lines. Like it's just crazy to me
Yeah.
because like what you said, right? People are telling you about a pain point without really describing looking for a solution. They're just describing something that's missing, and you can just mirror that back to
Right.
them. So um, any kind of quick closing remarks? I know that we are excited to see you soon, and it's been awesome to have you. We'd love to have you join again. We're
Yeah, for
always
sure.
looking for, yeah, folks to tell us a little bit more about kind of how things are going there. And I think that it's great that you work in an environment where you work so closely with your team members and you guys have these kind of weekly standing meetings. I think that that's a practice more people should do.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, like you were saying, it's sort of like you have to establish the processes to make it easy for everyone involved, and curate everyone's data. So like collect as much data as you can from other people so that you can work together in the best ways possible for each like subsection of your marketing department.
Awesome. Well, with that, and in that collaborative spirit, we
Yeah.
will sign off for this week and we will see everybody again next week. And until then, happy findability.
Thanks.